I used to hate zenithal priming. Back in 2018, when I started painting actual highlights and shadows on my models, I was told I had to do zenithal if I wanted realism. But what if I told you that that was a big, huge waste of time? So in today's video, I'm gonna show you what most painters get wrong about zenithal priming, what should you do instead in order to paint realistic miniatures, and how pros use it to make it actually useful. But before I do that, I kinda need to remind you what zenithal priming is. Zenithal priming consists in spraying white ink on a black primed model directly from above. The goal is to create a grayscale that would guide you through placing the highlights and the shadow. That's smart. Seems like a nice approach, doesn't it? Well, so they say. Because zenithal priming is not what you think. It's not what it's been sold to us. The truth is, zenithal priming is not meant to help us mapping where to place the highlight. Okay, but why? Where is the proof, Alice? To explain that, we need to go back to why you've been told that the spray from an airbrush or can help you identify highlights and shadows. The logic behind it is pretty simple. The spray would replicate the behavior of the light in its interaction with the surface. Because the spray, like the light rays, kind of travels in a straight line. So it would replicate the behaviors of the lights. And that's kind of true. If we take a look at this orc I sprayed from the above on his arms, especially his shoulder muscles, you can clearly see the shape automatically form, giving you useful information about how to highlight. Same thing on the Space Marine, on his head and shoulder pads. You can clearly see the roundness of the volume present in the model, right? Cool, so it is useful. Well, there is one big problem with that. And I think just moving my shot a bit down, you'll see what it is. Saw it yet? If you stay still with the spray, you only mark the highlights on the upper part of the model. And you'll leave a bunch of areas totally black for you to interpret. Zenithal spray will give you back half the information that you actually need to paint highlights and shadows. You need to move the spray around in order to hit every part of the model. But if you move, you will no longer have the accurate information about light. Zenithal was and still is trendy and popular among painters because it gives you the illusion of a cheat code for the most important thing in painting, which is painting highlights and shadows. If you have something like a Space Marine, you might have more information because the mini stands up straight and there are less hidden parts. But if you look at this orc, there is no way you're getting in there, not even angling the spray. So what do you do instead? How can you stop painting shitty ass minis that look flat like I used to in 2018? Let me take another orc from Armageddon and show you. I'm gonna do an actual light study where I use gray paint to mark kind of the middle tones of the model to separate the light planes from the shadow planes. First off, you're gonna drop the zenithal lighting because it's uglier than my older sister when she was born. Sorry, Erika. You're gonna use frontal light from the above, which is actually more flattering. Here the trick is not just thinking about the shapes of the mini, but which part of the model faces the light and which does not. The other trick is also simplifying. Make everything into cubes or cuboid. Torso, cuboid. Arms, cuboid. Weapons, cuboid. Legs, cuboid.
Cuboid for everyone!
Jokes aside, if we think about cuboids, we get the general side of the shape, aka the plane, that faces the light. Then we look at smaller, but still kind of bigger shapes, like the biceps, muscle of the shoulders, the abs, and so on. And we figure out at what point the plane stops facing the light, and when it turns, we stop with the gray. That's what I'm doing here. It's also important to maintain the shape, so when we have muscle like this, I'll try to keep everything rounded. Also, you need to create a path for the light to travel, so it's all connected and it looks more realistic and cohesive. The concept of planes, it's very simple to understand, but it's rarely mentioned in miniature painting, if at all. But in art in general, it's a well-known approach. For years, I struggled because of this, because what I was given, other than zenithal priming, was general tips about looking at shapes, or on the other hand, overwhelming theory about the physics of light, which I didn't want to learn, really. I didn't want to know. So I had to figure out for myself. Since I didn't want you to suffer as much as I suffered, I'm very proud to announce, after 10 months of hard work, my new learning system for highlight placements is finally here. The planes system. This system will finally give you a deep understanding of how light works without blasting you with useless theory. This system will allow you to make painting, highlights, and shadows feel effortless, with no more guesswork or relying on tutorials all the time, with a guided practice to achieve real results in just 10 days. You'll also have access to the Accelerator library, which is an entire bonus, aka free section, where you will be able to watch in-depth explanation for many types of models in well over 2 hours of organized footage. The early bird deal is out now using code EARLYBIRD2026 at checkout to get a special deal. And spots are very limited, so you better hurry. This is a game changer. I'm really proud of it, and I'm sure it's gonna help you. Moving on with the rest of the video. I continue my grayscale using a lighter gray, but this time I'm working on quote-unquote my middle tone plane to mark the brightest or near to brightest highlights areas of the model. Here you can also finally mark the smaller volumes. So for example, all the tiny volumes and wrinkles of the face of the orc, the smaller volumes that separate the anterior part of the deltoid muscle from the center section, but also remember to keep that continuity between the volumes. This is also an occasion to study different materials. Here we have leather, skin, non-metallic metal, and more, using different brushstroke to render different materials. But, my advice is to not overwhelm yourself with too many things to do. Maybe at the beginning, focus on just the light study and then move on to texture when you feel comfortable with that. Our brain struggles at learning too many things at once. That's why we do this with grays and we take color out of the equation. We take as many things as possible out of the table so we can focus on light interacting with our mini. The final step is to blend a bit the layers in order to create a grayscale that's smooth and not just in blocks. But this is totally optional. If you want to skip it, just skip it. But if you do decide to do it, you'll train your blending skills as well. To blend faster, I work on the edges where the two layers meet. I first work between the black primer and the first gray layer using a strong glaze consistency, applying a couple of layers. Then I do the same on the edge between the gray and the light gray. And remember, the smaller the space to blend, the easier it will be, but also the higher brush control you'll need. Okay. If pros are not using zenithal priming for highlight placement, what are they using it for? Well, for me, everything clicked watching Mark Masclin's approach to painting. And as soon as I figured out what zenithal priming was actually for, in that moment, I stopped hating it and I started using it myself. Pros understand that spray does not give you information about lighting unless the hand that guides the spray already knows about how light works. What pros use a white ink spray for is one of the following. Number one, identifying the focus of the model. Number two, mapping the lights. They're gonna use the airbrush to mark the spots, build color depth in order to shade down with glazes, and finally, locking in color vibrancy. What I discovered watching the master do it is that this technique is to study the sculpt itself by intentionally spraying some areas with a certain angle. The angles change, follow what they already know they want. But at this point, used like that, I wouldn't call zenithal priming anymore. I would call it a light study or an underpainting. If you change the direction of the light so it's more frontal and not zenithal, if you move the spray, if you spray on focus areas, that's not zenithal priming anymore. But I think at this point we are so used to the term that we keep using it, and sometimes it can get a little bit confusing. Recently, I'm really appreciating more and more the value of a good underpainting plus slapping on contrast paints. I've been using it on Make a Sponge a lot. If you saw my series Space Marine in less than 1 hour. Once you know volumes and light placement, you can paint minis any way you want. With any tool, dry brushes, sponges, whatever. And your minis are gonna be amazing and you're gonna be able to paint really fast as well. But what if you feel like you need extra help with this? Okay, don't worry, because I got you covered with this playlist here where I go over the volume things. So watch this.